Welcome back, everybody, to the live panel. We're going to be focusing on PropTech, data, innovation, and also how that takes us and real estate, especially the sector, beyond the crisis. So we'll be focusing more on where this takes us than where we are at the moment in the crisis. But first of all, let's just do some quick introductions. Let's start with you, Michelle. Just a quick kind of overview of yourself and the company.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Buxton. I'm the founder and CEO of Toolbox Group. Toolbox Group has two platforms. One is a tech product called Molcom, which is a tenant engagement and property management platform for real estate. And then there's Toolbox Marketing, which is our strategic marketing arm operating globally. Both of our products operate globally.
Super. Thanks very much. Florin.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Florin Iarca, and I'm the head of sales for Real Capital Analytics and Dacia. Real Capital Analytics, it's a one-stop shop solution for commercial property transaction across the world. We have data in just over 170 markets, and we track deals, trends, and other cool data. And Dacia, it's a one-stop shop for data in 3 countries, and we digitize land registries and we stitch it on our map. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Francesca.
Hi, I'm Francesca. I'm co-founder and CEO of AirRated. Aerated is a healthy building certification focused solely on indoor air quality. We've got a design certification, so we can come in new build or heavy refurb and do a design certification, or a performance-based certification where we come in with sensors, gather data, and derive an air score based on it. So currently, we formally launched in March 2020, and we've certified just over 2 million square foot of real estate.
Great, thanks very much. Lukas.
Hi everyone, my name is Lukas, Balik, and I'm CEO and co-founder of Spaceflow. What we do, we are providing a leading operating system that basically helps to integrate both physical and digital aspects of our lives and buildings in order to create, the best possible experiences for occupants. So we are partnering with some of the leading landlords from both commercial and residential side. And currently our platform is live all over 17 markets. And yeah, last 12 months has been really massive in terms of what changes has happened on the market, and it's gonna affect greatly the whole direction of this space. So really looking forward to discuss with all of you today the major trends.
Great, thanks very much. It's really interesting that we'll have here both the data side, the innovation side, the solution side, and also both across the office, but also the retail side, which I think is really useful. I wanted to just start with a couple of sort of general points, I suppose. So if we're looking at the changes brought about by the pandemic, what have you seen in terms of a greater focus on reliance on technology? How influential, do you think the pandemic will be for the sector? What are your thoughts on that, Michelle?
I think that, as I sort of said earlier, I think that everything is speeded up. I think, there's always going to be a slow digital transformation, especially in the retail sector, which is a sector traditionally very slow in adopting anything that's new and different. But that's been sort of forced forward through the pandemic. There's still a little bit of reluctance, but there is a need to understand in that reduced, that things have to be done better, more effectively and efficiently. So actually I'm seeing the adoption much speed up, and people are more interested. They're looking at the tech stack strategy, they're actually spending time on it, they're employing innovators and innovation departments. So things have moved quite quickly in the last 18 months to keep the retail real estate sector going forward and being able to adopt that technology.
And are you seeing that as well, Lukas, just in terms of, I suppose, within your own business as well?
Absolutely. Like I said, the speed of change these months, it's something that, we haven't, probably the whole market haven't seen for many decades. and it just accelerated what has been happening before already, but now under pressure that the whole market needs to adapt to the new reality and needs to adjust the offerings, for example, more to hybrid and flexible spaces and offerings. It is speeding up the whole implementation phase. So how we see it, we really look the building itself as a hardware, and in order to meet the needs of the customers itself, of the occupants, you need some kind of operating system that helps you first of all to connect all the tenant-facing features, but at the same time to also empower landlords with data, because they are now much more closer to their end customers than ever before, or they need to be. Not at the moment, because most of them are still, for example, in the office working from home remotely. But in order to understand them, they will need to obtain also new skill sets in the whole let's say in industry to be able to differentiate the offerings and being competitive. Because again, considering the vacancy growth, which will probably continue, you will need to somehow find a way for your business to still keep up with the trends.
And Francesca, interestingly, because you were due to launch almost a year ago, or did launch almost a year ago, I think. And it's one of those interesting areas, isn't it? Air quality, which was obviously a trend that was happening anyway. And then we've got the pandemic coming in. But is your sense that this will increase the overall trajectory of interest in that area, or do you think air quality will, it'll drop back again, because as humans we have a tendency to be easily able to forget these things? So what's your sense of that?
You're right that sometimes we do have very short memories, but I do feel like but kind of pre-pandemic it was nice to have. A lot of these things were nice to have, and then there was a shift to a more compelling competitive advantage to having healthy workplaces which had good indoor air quality. There was a study that came out of Harvard which actually quantified the benefit of having low levels of CO2, carbon dioxide, and low levels of TVOCs, so layman term chemicals, and then having those low levels impact cognitive function positively. So there's always been a competitive advantage that the market was shifting towards, but it was only the early adopters, the ones who wanted to take a punt on it, that were doing it. A lot of people, I think, had reservations about finding out something that wasn't so great about their space and then having to do something about it. But I think now there's been this shift towards a must-have, because everyone's awareness has been so heightened on indoor air quality in particular. There's so much information in the mainstream media. Like my friends, my family send me links on ventilation and indoor air quality that they've seen on BBC, for example. And it just means everyone's really becoming more educated, more informed, more clued up on these things. They will then start asking questions. So I think property owners are already seeing people ask the question. They don't even know really what they're asking, but they'll just mention it in passing. Property owners and employers are picking up on it and actioning things now before people come back to the workplace, in anticipation of this being not just a trend, but actually like a revolution. We've pushed ourselves to the point where we actually can't go back. We know too much, almost. We know how it impacts our personal health, our children's health, and I think this momentum is only going to gather speed. So it's been the catalyst for change, but I think it's permanent, lasting change.
Okay, that's really interesting. And Florin, from your point of view, you're obviously supplying market data, investment data. What have you been seeing in terms of the trends for your clients? What are they looking for? Is there more appetite for, it's interesting, we've seen a lot of discussions where people are seeking some kind of clarity over the difference between previous crises, particularly the global financial crisis, and this one, to try to work out what to do next. So I suppose, what are the trends that you're seeing in terms of demand?
Absolutely. I mean, what we've seen, there is an appetite for historical data. So if we look at some of our clients, I'm talking about risk managers, I'm talking about investors, they are looking as of how the market has acted during this pandemic and after the previous pandemic. So there's no lie about it. We are in a new cycle now, and we do not know where we are going. So, and a lot of people, there are a lot of opinions out there. However, to truly understand and make a good informed decision, everything has to be backed up with concrete data. I think that's the most important thing. But secondly, you need historical data. So, and also to nice segue into that, if you can add cross-border data to that, I think you can have a fantastic product. So yes, just to sum it up, we need our customers are looking for historical data, consistent good data, and cross-border data, which that's our bread and butter at both RCA and Dacia.
Okay, great. It'd be interesting. Oh, and if you've got any questions, please do ask them. When you're looking at your screen on the right-hand side, you'll see a Q&A button and a chat button. So as well as being able to chat with other people who are also in the event, you can also send a chat to us and also the Q&A. I'll be picking those up and I'll make sure that we answer your questions as well. Michelle, retail has obviously been, negatively affected, and particularly one of those areas that the market has viewed as especially negatively affected by this particular pandemic. I suppose more broadly, how do you see that? And also, what kind of solutions is technology being able to bring, I suppose, to help get the retail sector beyond into the next phase?
I think looking at the retail sector, we have to, or retail real estate, and just retail, you have to look at the whole way it's going to change. And you have to look at last mile logistics. You have to look at different usages for that space. We were talking before about John Lewis really quickly changing some of their space into flexi office space. But then you also look into, bigger real estate places, shopping centers that are looking at last mile logistics, that are looking at data centers, that are looking at completely different uses for that space. And if that's the case, how is that going to affect the way that space is used? And then you've got to look at the change in the way that people use a shopping centre. Probably a year to 18 months ago, the large schemes, out of town schemes were the places to be. It's all now community. So what's going to drive that community? What technology is going to enable the use of that space as a community space? And also a lot of this has been led by cloud. So you'll see a lot of the systems move into cloud, a lot of it being mobile technology. And for our specific platform, we're now a cloud platform. The use of mobile technology where people can use it anywhere, anytime, has got to be the way that people want to interact. When they're looking at going to a place, whether it's a shopping place or a restaurant or wherever, the first thing they're worried about is safety and security. How are they going to get that information? How are you going to make sure that place is secure and safe for the customer? There's technology involved there. There's technology in communication. There's ways of managing these properties more effectively and efficiently because the money's not there that used to be there. So, every part of the way that you live and breathe a space is going to be technology enabled going forward, and not going forward now.
So this is already starting, essentially.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Lukas, just a quick question that's come in from you. Feel free to pick up that as well. But a quick question that's come in from Matt on the Q&A button. Thanks very much for that, Matt. Lukas mentioned lots of change recently. What was the most in-demand new functionality for buildings? So I don't know whether you want to pick that up, Lukas. Just in terms of, I suppose, that tenant demand side. What sort of functionality are people looking for?
Mm-hmm. So basically, we try to guide we try to guide the end users throughout the whole journey, right? Like from entering the building, touchless access system, for example, to getting them information about the air quality or occupancy. What I see as a big hit at the moment across our clients, and what we are introducing heavily is, for example, the booking engine. Because with the booking engine, you can seamlessly, if you link it with the payments, manage all your spaces and share amenities within with all tenants in the building, whether it's a parking spot or, for example, a hot desk or a meeting room or any type of shared space. So you can leverage this. You can gain some additional revenues. And then what I would say is the challenge for the landlord is to say, I am actually the one who needs to be in the driving seat of this change. Because if you introduce a technology who will be able to connect the whole building itself, and then you will be able to provide, let's say, the cluster for tenants as well, so they can have their own private hot desks and meeting rooms. This is a technology that we see landlords and the market is heavily looking for, because then you will be able to integrate all these use cases cross floors and across the whole building or the portfolio, which is super important for landlords to obtain the data and being able to manage these buildings.
Okay, good. I hope that answered your question, Matt. I thought it did, so that's good. If not, let us know, and any other questions, do send them in. Francesca, we've had a growing kind of focus on ESG, impact investment, and that's come through over the whole week, actually. And as well, one of the sort of key aspects of that was the ability of technology to be able to benchmark these things so that you can then improve on it. I mean, how important is that, the growing focus on ESG and growing regulation coming particularly out of the EU from that side?
I think just to address 2 points, that part about benchmarking and standardization of how you measure these things is so important, because like Lukas was saying, if you have a portfolio, then you want to be monitoring it, measuring it, managing it in a way that's effective, and almost have a blueprint in the approach that you take to these buildings. But also, if you want to compare like for like, you need to be measuring like for like, and having that benchmark in place is a really good place to start. So I know that GRESB is the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, and they've been around for a while, but they've really hit the nail on the head in terms of coming in right at the beginning and defining what that benchmark and standardized process of measuring ESG agendas looks like. Also, I think there's been a lack in the past of reference and guidance in terms of what people should be striving for, which is something that GRESB covers. But in terms of something like indoor air quality guidelines and legislation and regulation, that has been so lacking. And if your criteria were to meet regulation, you would still be so far behind, because regulation at the moment is in line with health and safety. So with an example, with CO2, for example, carbon dioxide, the health and safety measure is 5,000 parts per million. But at that point, you are so unproductive, it's not even funny. So we need to be thinking of healthy spaces, productive spaces, not just meeting minimum standards for regulation and legislation. And also, if we wait for legislation and regulation to become stricter, we're going to be waiting a long time. And I know that it's on the cusp of change now, but still not enough change. So we've got the Future Building Standard in the UK, which is great in its approach because it's taken sustainability and healthy buildings and had them hand in hand in its approach to how it's managing the future of buildings. That's great. And Part F is out for consultation at the moment, and there is a section in there, and this is a building regulation. So this is something like properly legal if we're looking at how to build our buildings. And that's got some stuff in there around indoor air quality monitoring, but it touches on CO2 as one parameter. It doesn't go any further than that. And that's where it's a little frustrating from, I think, our industry's point of view that, yes, okay, you're telling us what's safe, but actually what's healthy and what's productive? How am I going to get the most out of the people in my building? What's going to make them feel great when they come into this space? That part is lacking. So I think a standardized approach, absolutely fantastic, but having the things that you strive for rather than things that should be like just the fundamental basis to what we're doing is the next stage. So actually putting things, and this is the whole thing around occupiers, I believe, will start setting that standard. So we've got regulation and legislation, but actually if occupiers are demanding healthy spaces, if occupiers are demanding productive spaces, they will start setting the benchmark that people should be working to.
Okay, good. I'm going to pick that idea up in a little bit and see how that works, both in terms of the office side and also the retail side there with Michelle and Lukas. I just wanted to just pick up with you, Florin. I mean, Francesca there mentioned data benchmarking, and that also has an aspect of transparency around it again, so that then people can really get a handle on what's happening. How much transparency? I mean, you're looking at investment data the whole time, leasing data, those kinds of things. How much transparency is there in the market? And I suppose, where are we? Where's the comparison between different markets in a way?
I think UK is the most transparent market in the world. Outside the UK, there's no transparency whatsoever. So we're looking at for example, let's look at Germany. Germany and the UK, they're two at the very end of the spectrum. So it's extremely incredible to get hold of data over there. Lease data, once again, and I think we need to look back, first of all, look at some underlying data, which is missing. A lot of investors, a lot of owners, a lot of CRE operators, they're missing that underlying data. And that's where we come in, both from Dacia and both from RCA, and that's what we're very good at. We give the users some underlying data, and they could create some different reports and trends. Coming back onto the lease data, luckily Land Registry in the UK is the first land registry in the world to digitize their lease database, and we're talking about 5.3 million lease terms. Now, what we did, we quickly capitalize on that. So we took it, we digitized it, we plotted on the map, and we're the first company to show that database. On the RCA side, that's what we've been doing for 20 odd years. We've been trying to bring transparency to the market in more than, as I said earlier, more than 170 markets. But I think, just to answer your question, the most transparent market, I would say, is the UK. Probably the least, we're looking towards Asia and Asia Pacific and Germany, which is right next to us here.
Okay, good. I've got a question come in from Martin L. Thanks very much, Martin. And also, if there are questions there that you like, you are also able to like them. So that do feel free to look at the questions and like them if you like, and then those will go up to the top of my priority list. But the question from Martin is that the panel are providing great property solutions and tools, but not everyone is using them yet. So what are the current barriers or reasons that potential clients give for not utilizing PropTech solutions? And I think that's an interesting one. So let's pick up a little bit on some of the barriers, and it would be interesting to hear the reasons that you have had for people not using those, not utilizing this. Who wants to start?
I'm happy to start. As always. I mean, I think for me, it's all about seeing the value that the tech can deliver. I think a lot of the time the market sees the cost and doesn't, and say, you know, especially in retail at the moment where everyone's trying to reduce occupation costs and service charge costs. So they're saying what we can't do is now go and implement another cost. But what they're not doing is saying, what can our product do to add value in terms of maybe reducing costs by being able to put a lot more tech through one platform. And also it's a case of, I think people are really nervous to fail. You know, there's this feeling in the marketplace that if you're going to go into tech, you need to make sure 100%, 200% that it's going to work. And as a result, in some instances, they don't even try. They just say no. And there's also the other side of it where they don't necessarily understand I know that sounds a bit, you know, they don't understand tech. Obviously, people do understand tech, but they don't necessarily understand the different parts that a tech product can add value to their operations. And they're a bit nervous to open up and ask those questions as well. It's much easier just to say, no, there's a barrier there. So I would say cultural, cost, and skill barrier.
Okay, good. Lukas, what's your sense of that?
I would only agree and add that, you know, I believe that the customer success management is extremely important vertical of every PropTech company to have. in order to drive the success, because at the end it's really all about the adoption, right? Like I think there is numerous amazing PropTech companies out there that they have, you know, all these features, but if we are not able to connect these features with the right use cases jointly with the client, then we don't meet the successful outcome. So what we do, we really from the day one, we really go through the main pain points with the client, so we are able to connect the biggest ones with the features itself, not to overwhelm the management and the team as well, because it's an ongoing process, and we are adding more in time. And you know, the magic happens once you get the platform fully integrated, because this is where you can streamline majority of the operations through the digital product. And just one thing that works great for us is that we are sharing actually our roadmap with our key clients, or you know, the big partners we have. So we are having meetings with them just to make sure that our thinking about the product and the roadmap is, let's say, aligned with their way of how they see it, how they see the strategy of the portfolio, and jointly we are able to add these things, for example, they see missing to the roadmap. So then it's really again about having a strategy together with the key clients to deliver what we all want.
And Francesca, I suppose aside from the fact that since you launched, you probably haven't been able to leave your house.
Yep.
What have been some of the other challenges?
I think absolutely Michelle's point on that fear of failing, which is quite sad actually, because it should be one of those accessible things that people feel like they can try. And I think a lot of companies that offer tech solutions do realize that they need to de-risk the approach for clients. So they'll tend to offer like a baby step approach to how they start implementing solution-based technology. But also I think there's a lack of understanding and ownership, whether it's like, should the landlord be offering this to me as an occupier? And then the landlord is like, well, I lease you this space, but then it's up to you how you use the space. So you can buy it. And then you have the interdepartmental challenge of, does this sit under HR? Because if it's something like air quality, then it's for the benefit of our people and it makes them more productive and it's better for their health and well-being. So does it sit there? Or if you're going to use it in your marketing and sales, does it sit under marketing and sales? Or if it's for property operations, does it sit under property operations? It's one of those things where it probably needs a consortium type of network to start funding these projects, but I don't think anyone really wants to put the effort into how that works. So at the moment, I mean, our clients in particular tend to be the property owners, but they are making a conscious effort to communicate everything they're doing to the end user, the occupier in the building, in the hope that they will also uptake this sort of stuff. So it's a bit of a nightmare in terms of who buys into these things, but I think that is an inherent problem, that there's no ownership or accountability designated to anyone, so no one knows who's meant to be buying these things, which is ridiculous.
Super agree here. Like this is something we face as well, and I try to touch it also with the verticals, you know, where exactly tenants and landlords need to step in. So I think this is now being this is shaping, and we will see. I believe that the landlords need to definitely be in the driving seat of the change in order to, you know, still differentiate and be competitive, especially with the current environment on the market.
I mean, for me, it sounds like it's a lot of landlords don't have strategies in terms of tech, so they're not thinking. So we've got a strategy. How do we enable it with tech? It's sort of an ad hoc thing. And that can lead to failure, because you can't just, plug and play with various different bits of tech. There has to be a strategy to build that tech stack. So, 40% of our strategy now is led by CIOs. And that in some ways is correct, because as Francesca said, if the CIO isn't running the tech strategy, then you're never going to get that consistency, and you're never going to know who you should be selling to or who the buyer is.
Okay, so it sounds as though there needs to be more kind of thought, particularly in the industry, in terms of their tech strategy generally, to be able to enable some of these solutions to actually work effectively. And Florin, from your point of view, because obviously RCA to a certain extent also has partners who are providing data, you're holding that data, doing the analysis, and it comes back to the market. Does that also create issues with things like data ownership, which have been parts of these conversations for a long time? You know, who owns the data, what happens with the data? So is that one of the challenges from your side, Florin, or what are you seeing in terms of the challenges that Martin was asking about?
I think just to echo what the other panelists were saying, and I think you all agree, and I hope you all agree with me, selling tech into, let's say, landlords or investors nowadays, it's almost like selling a mobile phone in the 80s. I think the market is still embryonic. I think sometimes we need to step back and also look at how we manage to sell, because I personally don't think we as tech providers, we should have a consultative sell. I think we should have more of an educational sell, because we're still embryonic, we're still at the beginning. Real estate, old traditional real estate, it still works. You know, when I started, my competitor was pen, paper, and Excel, and it still is nowadays. This is what I'm saying. But in terms of data ownership, not so much. Especially I can talk on Dacia, not so much, because we are a SaaS platform, we're a cloud-based, exactly as Michelle said earlier. We see landlords, investors, operators, and occupiers, they're moving to cloud, and they're quite comfortable at purchasing cloud-based solution. The challenge I think we have, as I said, nobody wants to push the go-ahead button. Nobody wants to be, it's a matter of who will buy it. That's the challenge that we see. So, and sometimes how we overcome that is us, exactly as Francesca said, it's a babysit approach. We babysit them, we educate them. In the end, if you have a good product, they will buy. And we've been successful, same as the other panelists, we've been successful for years. But yeah, the challenges I would say is, to sum it up, it's an embryonic market. We're still at the beginning.
Okay, good. There's an interesting question coming from Lewis. Thanks very much, Lewis Rapley, for that, which picks up a point that I wanted to bring out as well, which is there's a growing flight to quality for office space, with occupiers focusing on quality space with the best ESG, wellness, and social factors. But who's responsible for delivering such space? The landlords, the occupiers, or both? And I think that's a really interesting point. What's your sense of that, Lukas? I mean, who's responsible for delivering these solutions?
So how we see it, based on the talks with with some of the landlords and their strategies as well, and how we actually structure our product and the vision for Spaceflow, is that landlords should really be the ones who will set up the infrastructure for this. And then it's the actual tenants who can leverage it, can add their own hot desks, meeting rooms, connect their own data, for example, for occupancy or air quality. But in the modern office or workplace, there has to be some kind of infrastructure, or again, operating system that will be able to connect all these tenant-facing features. So landlords, from my perspective.
Okay, good. Does anybody else have a different view on that, or is that the same for everybody?
I do agree with Lukas that landlords definitely need to be handing over the infrastructure to tenants, occupiers coming into their spaces. They need to provide, they probably need to be the ones who say, this is the baseline, like this is what we're handing over to you as a tenant. It's up to you how you engage with the space, how you use the space in terms of the value that you get from it. But that does also require the landlord to have that effective handover process. So, I mean, it's kind of, I keep coming back to air quality because it's my niche, but if we're looking at air quality, this is the baseline air quality for the building. So that's the quality of space the landlord's giving you as a tenant. A lot of air quality is determined by how people use the space. But our landlords are saying, how can we educate? And this is on Florin's point about education. It's embryonic. People don't really know what they don't know. So they need to be told, and not in a patronizing way, but a lot of people don't know how their activities compromise their indoor air quality. So we've got a lot of landlords requesting tenant handbooks, so tenant guidebooks, how to best use my space, where it's up to them whether they follow the guidebook and the rules of best practice. They're not going to be governed by them in any way, but it's just, this is the information you need and you can make decisions based off it, but at least you know, and you're equipped with that information. So I think, yeah, absolutely, on Lucas's point, landlords setting a space up right and enabling occupiers to use it well, but also giving them that information on Florin's point about education. I think the two need to be married together, but the landlord can be the one to facilitate that, absolutely.
Okay, good. I wanted to pick up on, you know, one of the areas, if we're looking sort of towards the future in a way, you know, as the stimulus from governments begins to, you know, to draw back, there's an expectation of quite a significant economic hit. And often in those times, companies begin to cut budgets. So from that point of view, I suppose, how do we see that? If there's a recession, companies looking for efficiencies in cost structures, do you think that'll accelerate digital solutions, or is there more of a concern, like you mentioned, Michelle, there around you know, people looking far more at the costs and actually this being a challenge rather than an accelerator?
Well, I think a lot of what Florin and Francesca have said, and Lucas, is that it's all about education at the end of the day, isn't it? You know, it's educating our customer to understand what our PropTech can deliver. And to be honest, it should be delivering a return on investment pretty quickly. You know, gone are the days where you'd put in ERP systems and it would take you, you know, 10 years to pay that off or see the return on investment. You know, our PropTech product, and I'm sure Lucas's is the same, all of us are the same, is you should immediately see that return. And it's for us to educate the market as to what that's going to be. You know, tech will enable efficiencies and savings, but there is an investment, and it's not a cost; it's an investment in order to get there. Things have to change, and tech will enable that change. But yeah, the barrier still is understanding the value.
Okay, well, let's drill down a little bit that in terms of understanding the value. So let's start with you, Lucas. I mean, where is the value? Is that quantifiable? Can a landlord say, okay, yes, well, I've got happy tenants and I'm already seeing that in terms of additional rent or higher asset values? I mean, where do people actually see this value, and how can we quantify it?
Mm-hmm. So I would say, like, the office sector has been for a long time providing, you know, the one type of product, right? It was basically all about about the same. And what is now changing is that you have all these shifts to flex, to hybrid, that gives you opportunity to reshape your offerings and your product as a landlord. And there are many opportunities linked with this, like, you know, monetizing things that you wouldn't be able to ever monetize before, and that's thanks to, you know, much more on-demand things, or as a service, you know, model operations. So if you look at this as an opportunity, and again, you're able to take this as an opportunity for the business to actually grow, not just to you know, see your vacancy growing, then you can easily monetize your spaces through the digital products. You can easily save costs on the operations, because, for example, for many things that you need to have many resources on your end, you don't need them anymore. There are things like guest management or access system that you can streamline super easily through mobile platforms or in digital products. And at the end, you get a lot of data that helps you to learn about your customer, which again helps you to predict the offerings for the future.
And Francesca, is there a way of being able to see real value? Do you think going forward that there's going to be different valuations or higher valuations, let's say, for those that are proven to have better air quality?
So it's a really good question, and it comes up a lot in terms of the value premium. It's like, will it go towards value premium, or will there be a brown discount? And it might be that in the first instance, there is a value premium. We see added value as accelerated leasing campaigns, reduced void periods, rather than a higher price per square foot. And I think that's probably how it should be, is that you gain value in other ways than just upping the price. But I think there will become a critical mass where so many buildings are doing the same that others that aren't and are becoming obsolete face of brown discounts. So I think it will move towards that way rather than the premium rental, as much as everyone I'm sure would love it to in the property world. And actually, just on that point about budgets obviously being tightened, and will technology and the uptake of it be impacted by that? I think because I think initially technology will be implemented for maybe estate rationalization. So trying to make your spaces smaller, make them more efficient, make them more effective. And then in those smaller spaces, you're not having to spend so much on technology. But when you do, it impacts the productivity and the health of your workforce. And that kind of JLL rule of thumb, 330, 300, where 3% of your cost is spent on utilities, 30 on rent, and 300 on payroll. I think because those first two are going to be massively reduced when you rationalize your estate, and then the quality of your space will directly impact that 300. I think it can only be beneficial to implement these sorts of things. And I think, again, I think everyone's in agreement in the fact that if you don't, you will very rapidly get left behind.
Yeah, I think there's really interesting questions about valuation going forward and how that might include some of these things which are more like customer satisfaction, which are more like air quality, because if the data coming out of the US is that in a better, higher quality ESG compliant office, then actually your workers perform better, then suddenly the quality of the space becomes significantly more than the size of the space in a way. And it'll be interesting to see whether that leads to any changes, I think. And Florin, I suppose from your point of view, again, it's more difficult to benchmark these kinds of things in terms of value that people get. But I guess, often people are using data, I suppose, to be able to compare and contrast, and also, I guess, be able to kind of guess what's going to happen next and try to get ahead of the market, I suppose.
Absolutely, that's spot on from your side. So let's take, for example, some of our global clients. So what value do we bring to the table? So, we cater to investors, we cater to owners, we cater to brokers, agents, lenders, even valuers. And I would say some of what do they have in common? Well, everybody needs to develop a strategy, especially when you have a global presence. If you want to develop a global strategy, you need access to global data. Ideally, you might want to have it in the same place, one-stop shop. If you're a broker and you're a global broker, you might want to source opportunities. And again, you might want to have global data. You're executing transactions. You're a valuer. Once again, you might need to have good local as well as global data. So I'm talking just from RCA's perspective. Where do we bring value? Small players, largest players, is this global footprint, and not just that, it's almost the history of it. So when you combine the global footprint with good track record and history, I think the value speaks for itself. So that's where we bring value to the table.
Okay, good. And Michelle, from your point of view, it'd be interesting also to pick up, because I know you've been doing quite a lot of survey type research as well, looking at some of the trends, particularly there for the tenants. Is there anything from that is useful, you think, in terms of looking at retail, especially as we move beyond this crisis and into the new world?
I think we seem to be talking about cost and efficiencies and value all the time, but we've done a lot of research in terms of how our product can add value. And at the moment, we've got a white paper out where we're actually showing about a 15% saving on cost, which is great. So our tenants, from a retail perspective, are looking for a better place to operate, a more efficient place to operate, a place where their communication is direct with the customer coming through the door, which Malcolm allows you to do, so that the customer can also be communicated with through mobile technology or any technology in terms of how they should be using the space. So there's the whole customer behavior side, and as I said earlier, the whole community and localization side of that, which is really important. And then there's the tenant and how that space should be activated and used. And I think what everyone's talking about is the competitive advantage that a landlord will get from having technology that gives a better end user experience, both for the tenant, who is their customer, but also for the end customer who's walking through the door. So I think ultimately the tenant wants the best at the least value, at the least cost.
Okay, good.
Does that answer your question?
It does answer the question. I'm interested in that white paper as well, Michelle. Just in terms of, you mentioned there that it's kind of showing the cost savings that can be achieved.
Yes, it is. So we've done a lot of work, obviously with COVID coming out, we've done a lot of work with our customers looking at, so if you implement Malcolm into your property, 1 property, 2 properties, 3 properties, what is the cost saving that you get? So if you put in a platform and you have one use case, and that use case could be, say, it's just tenant engagement, and then you add on all the other things that Malcolm can give you, like security and workflow management, etc. You can then start to have an integrated platform which you can feed all your other systems into. And also with the likes of Brookfield in the US, they managed to do away with 12 other systems by putting Malcolm in. So there's a direct result in terms of massive savings, and also in terms of resourcing, time spent, all of those things. So if you go onto our website, all the information is there to pick up on the report, which is really interesting.
Great. Good. We've only got around 2.5 minutes left, so I just wanted to do a quick round of, I guess, what's the biggest trend that you think we're going to see, the most innovative things that you're expecting to see, both, I guess, if there's anything in your business that you're expecting to see, but also much more widely. Let's start with you, Lukas.
I think a lot has been said already, but to touch on something that we still haven't discussed and we see in Spaceflow, for example, as a huge opportunity for the market and for the products itself, is the focus on sustainability, and how we can also better prepare our clients, landlords, to meet the regulations, because there is a lot to meet. In the upcoming years, and we know, for example, that even like European Union is asking for or will demand all landlords to have some kind of connectivity or dashboards of being able to control and monitor all the energy consumption and water consumption in the building. So basically, all energy is under control, which again, as a tenant experience platform, we can leverage of how we change the behavior of people in the building as well, showing them the data and using it, as some kind of maybe gamification as well to better control these, and obviously at the end create savings for landlords as well.
Okay, good. Florin, what's your perspective?
I think the next big thing could be data democratization. If we look at landlords, investors, they sit on huge silos of data, internal data on their properties. A lot of them, we've noticed, they don't do anything with it. they don't monetize on it. So I think the next big thing will be getting all your internal data, all of your properties, all the introductions you have seen throughout the years, every single property particular, and combine it with systems like ours, systems like Lukas's, and so on and so forth. I think that personally, I think I would love to see that going forward in the future. Landlords actually using their internal data, because if you go now and speak with them, everybody's tech is data driven, but if you ask them, do you actually use it? They would probably say no, and they said no, it sits in our G drives and internal, and we don't do anything with it. So that's my 2 pence.
Okay, good. Francesca.
I think it's using data in a way that's easy to digest and easy to communicate to an end user, so a building occupant. First and foremost, that's going to be, gaining confidence back in workspaces, back in just indoor spaces in general. And then kind of a longer term view, if you're going to invest in changes to your systems, then also using that data as proof that the changes work. A lot of the time there's investment put into products or solutions that isn't tested, and they kind of just, fingers crossed, I think it's working, but there's no way of visualizing that working. Particularly, I mean, in my space with air quality, you can't see air. So it's very difficult to know whether the new piece of clean air tech that you've invested in actually works. So I think, yeah, using data, but making it easy to digest and easy to communicate to people who it matters to.
Super. Michelle.
3 things from me. First one is agile space as a service. So looking at how space can be changed from how it's used in the morning to how it's used in the afternoon to how it's used in the evening. Data as a service, which I think we've all sort of touched on, how you use that data, who uses it, who interprets it, what value does it add. And then the last one is ESG. I think we're all looking at how we can operate better from a social perspective, a sustainability perspective. And it's, it's PropTech businesses, like we all have, really need to look at their ESG. We're small businesses, but it's still really important to us as owners and managers of those businesses, but also to the people who work for us and the type of talent that we want to attract. So I think ESG for me is probably top of that list.
Okay, perfect. Because I'm allowed to, because I can control the time on this to a certain extent, and there isn't an event immediately after this one, because this is the last one of the day. I'm going to allow a sneaky question that came in from Marek, and I obviously missed, but it's just made the timing. Marek's talking about data centers. They're becoming a separate category for investment assets in real estate. From your perspective as new technology people, what are the main requirements for a data center in comparison to an office or a warehouse in terms of location, various things like that? It's a really interesting question, but I'm going to just broaden it out slightly a little bit because there is a big focus on data centers more generally. So do you see this as probably helping highlight data more generally and innovation and tech, but do you see this as a growing asset class more generally, the sort of data center side? I know it's not your specific area, but I just thought I would ask.
I can give my 2 pence worth. Certainly in some of the investors and owners I'm talking to from the repurposing of shopping centres and the brilliant location of where those buildings are, and bringing data to like logistics to the last mile, then that is space that people are looking at. However, there's a lot of effort and a lot of repurposing that needs to go into it. So that's it's not my speciality, but that's the little bit of info I can give you.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting metric, I guess, to use. As the more advanced we get in technology, the more data centers will be popping up because we need them to process and store this data. From my point of view, we have been asked about data centers because they have to be managed very carefully from an air quality perspective. So that's one thing. I think, and I don't know, this is maybe a question for the audience, whether data center companies are following ESG closely. They must be, because the energy consumption must be huge for such a small footprint. I know you don't have people as such working in there and having to make them productive and healthy people, but I mean, we have to manage the air quality well, but I can imagine the the energy consumption, they have to be really mindful of how sustainable their spaces are, I would imagine.
Thanks very much for joining us. Thank you to all of the speakers. Thank you for your questions, and look forward to seeing you in the networking or at the next sessions that we're running. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.